a very, very old story, actually. Before I get to that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the word Hoarfrost, because I don't want any of you getting any funny ideas about what the word Hoarfrost means. Now, Hoarfrost, if you go out on an early winter morning and the grass was wet the night before, you'll see in the morning that the grass is all silvery and white, and if you walk across it, it crunches under your feet, and that is Hoarfrost. Well, sometimes it can grow up the window pane, and it looks like lovely feathers or ferns going up the outside of the window pane. It also tells you the window's a little loose, but that also is Hoarfrost. So now you're all clear on that one, and we don't have to worry about any misinterpretations. Now, some say the Hoarfrost giant came to be as the result of 9 pieces of the god Dawn fallen from the sky, watered by the tears of the goddess Danu. Others believe the Hoarfrost giant was actually one of the great race of the Lorien giants who came to the sacred isle to chase away the Duodedanin, as if that would work. The fair folk are still there to this day. I don't think it's important where or what you think about where the giant came from. I think what's important is the message of this story, and I'm going to tell it to you in very general terms so you don't get caught up by the dark. Yeah? All right. Back in the beginning of things, way back, when the Mother Earth was spinning in the void of space, in total darkness, just spinning there, minding her own business, collecting dust from other galaxies where stars exploded centuries and centuries ago. When she came into the sight of the Sky Lord, he looked upon her, and he was smitten. Oh, he reached out to her and spun his light and his warmth around and around and around her, and she was tickled and she giggled a bit, but a layer of air formed around her because of all of this energy, you see. And that energy continued to build and mixed with the stardust, especially on our sacred island of Ireland. And then the first people came into being from that stardust. So this was a lot of change for one planet to take, don't you know? It certainly was. And the Mother Earth reacted. No, it was not her intent to harm anyone. She liked the attention of the Sky Lord. She was concerned for these new creatures on her surface. But she herself was full of sacred energy and magic that only obeyed the laws of all the universe. And so, up from her center came this hot molten rock, and it came out of her surface in the form of volcanoes, great volcanoes that spewed lava and ash, dust into the air, gases. Oh, it was terrible. And all that mixed with the mist that was already in the air and became a thick layer of clouds all the way around the planet, all around the Great Mother. This was a big change for the new people on the planet. They were used to lots of light and warmth, and here it was going away. The Sky Lord no longer could see his beloved. She was blocked from his view, blocked from his light and his warmth. And so she began to cool, which at first was a good thing. You didn't need someone spewing all that hot rock and lava all over the place. That wasn't helpful at all. But she continued to cool, even after things settled down. And ice started to form over the surface of her. And the new people who had had to find shelter for the first time in their existence became afraid. And that fear and the ice and the snow that started to form on her surface, from all of that, the Hoarfrost giant was formed. Now, as he grew, it became colder and colder. The winds blew and howled. You could barely see for all the snow. And the ice and snow were now so thick around the Great Mother, she slept as in a cocoon. This was a hard time for the new people. They had to learn to gather things like branches from dead trees and bits of plants, whatever they could find, because most everything was dead. The Hoarfrost giant continued to grow in size and in strength. So they had to keep warm, and they had to burn things in caves or sheltered area. They had to learn to kill animals for food because there were no plants to eat. Finally, when the Hoarfrost giant was done forming, his head was so high in the sky that the shards of ice shooting from his head brushed against the cloud surface, and great lightning struck the earth. His breath, as it came out, could freeze anything solid in front of him, and his feet, if they stepped on anything, well, there would be a little pink smush on the snow, and that's all. The new people had to work very hard to survive. But somebody, probably a grandmother, I would bet myself, decided that the main thing to do to combat this Hoarfrost giant was part of what formed him: fear. That person decided to stop being afraid and to start asking for what was needed, a return to light and warmth and support. And so the people began to take sticks and wrap them with hair or hide or anything they could get their hands on, light them in the fire, and go out upon the surface of the Great Mother, finding places where the snow and ice did not cover, great rocks or shelves, anywhere where they could stand directly upon her. They held their torches. They called up to the Sky Lord and asked him to remember that they needed light and warmth. They called down to the Great Mother and asked her to remember that they were her children and they needed her to support them. They taught this to the children and to the grandchildren. This went on for some time. And finally, the Great Mother heard. She turned and stretched in her icy cocoon, and then she breathed. And the ice began to crack. The Hoarfrost giant was stomping around with his great feet, trying to cover up the cracks. But he was fighting a losing battle. Finally, her breath escaped through the cracks up into the clouds, and rain fell, carrying the dust and the mist and the ash with them. Some say the tears of the earth. And finally, the Sky Lord could see her again and reached down with tendrils of light and warmth and struck the icy surface. Now, the Hoarfrost giant was up against too much, for the attention of the Sky Lord to the Earth Mother, and her affection for him was more than he was going to be able to stand against. And so he began to melt in earnest. The first melting of him went down into the center of the Great Mother and came up as steam, pushing mountains up around the volcanoes, putting cracks in the mountains, and where the Hoarfrost giant had stomped around in his tantrums, filled it like a basin, became the oceans. As his eyes and ears melted, they became all manner of birds. As his teeth melted, they became the creatures of the sea. And when his heart began to melt, it exploded and became the whales and the dolphins. From the core of him, the ash and the dust, as it struck the lands, turned everything green. As that ash and dust met with the waters, turned everything blue. When his legs and feet began to melt, that brought forward the sacred trees, the rowan, the oak, the ash, the hawthorn. And so, at least on our sacred island of Ireland, this is how things look to this day. It's a creation story, but why do you think, now those of you who have heard this, no fibbing, no telling, why do you think I'm telling you this story? Why would this be important today? Any guesses?
It's springtime.
Spring, oh yes, it's spring, yes, right you are, Ray. It is springtime, renewal and rebirth, the balance of the equinox with us today. For my part, I tell this story to remind you all that whether it be light and warmth, or water and ash and dust, you have to take great care what you put into the Great Mother, for you have no control over when or how or in what manner she will give it back. Do you understand me? All right then. Well, I think I'm done, young man. If you would help me again, and I believe I need that basket.